Good afternoon, everybody. We are calling to order the July board meeting of the Housing Authority of the Birmingham District. Let's pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. Let's begin with roll call. Commissioner Lewis, well, Vice Chairperson Lewis.
I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Pantazis.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson. All right, we have a quorum. I will open the floor to adopt the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agendas. I think there's two of them, aren't there? Or no, the one agenda. Yeah, motion to adopt the agenda. Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly second to adopt the agenda. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, we have adopted the agenda. That passes. Now we have approval of minutes from the public hearing from April 8th, as well as their regular meeting from May 20th. Commissioners, I don't know if you had, hopefully you've had an opportunity to review those minutes. Any changes?
Motion to approve both sets of the minutes.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly second to approve the minutes from the public hearing from April 8th, as well as the regular meeting from May 20th. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that item carries. Old business, Mr. Northern.
First of all, I'll say good morning to all the commissioners, the audience, and individuals that may be listening from home. So related to our old business, we had a few items that the board members had wanted to hear about and know about from our last board meeting. One of those, they're not listed here, but one of those were the security upgrades that we talked about. And a story ran this week where an interview happened where the news, we ran the statistics and data related to that. And so that it is showing right now that the crime is down. We haven't had a murder, knock on wood, in our community since we really start putting the information out and doing the messaging. And also we have some great responses coming back from our clients at the site. So that's a major plus. I know one of the things that we still need to do is get our organized committees together. And as far as the old business, that was really all we had to go over at this board meeting. I'm not sure if there's anything else any of my team members can recall that we need to talk about. I know we're in the process of negotiating the new contract with the police. Right now, we're on the extension of the old contract, and it's at the point now where we're doing our final review before we send it back to the police department. So they came to us with a draft, and so we're sending it, we're going back and forth now. So.
Commissioners, any old business before we move to new business?
Well, just one thing, Mr. Chairman, concerning the committees. I know that that's a working process, but I too would like to see us kind of move forward with our committee structure so we can kind of talk through some things before we get here.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
I'd echo that as well. I had it in my notes to go over it, so I'm glad you brought it up, Mr. Northern. So excited to get back to work in that capacity. And I don't know how the open meetings and things will work, but if it may facilitate more attendance at the subcommittee or committee level meetings, doing some of those via Zoom might be helpful if possible, just to kind of if instead of having 2 or 3 hours of trying to coordinate, you might be able to get them done a little easier that way. So just a thought. The only couple of things I had, I'm glad you mentioned the kind of data tracking. I want to keep, looking at that. And if there's one thought I had was maybe reaching out to someone at UAB that might be in kind of a studies department that might be able to look at the success of the usage of the cameras and ways that, we might be able to empirically, really dig into that data or someone that, is doing that sort of research in the community, I think would be interesting to see. So I'd love to kind of continue to monitor it and figure out ways we can not only make sure it's working, but also that we're using it in the best capacity. And one thing, this is kind of, I guess, super old business, but it's definitely not just a recent meeting. It was one thing I think we had talked about back with Ms. Foster in this past fall when we were kind of trying to address a lot of the COVID related issues. internet access at our sites. I think we had talked back in the last fall that some of the utility companies were helping us move towards, is a more robust access point at each of our sites. So I don't know where we stand on that. And this is kind of out of the blue. So I'm not expecting to have exact information on that today, but I'd like us to follow up on that and see where things are headed or where they currently are in that regard, if possible.
Actually, I can add something to that. Now we are looking at a couple options related to that, along with the funding that the board set aside to help upgrade the security lighting, cameras, and license plate readers. We did set aside additional $1 million for connectivity, along with other monies that's out there. So we're currently working on that now in terms of our plans. We met with a couple of local contractors. We met with the power company. So we're moving that direction. So next board meeting, I'll make sure we can have a more detailed summary of where we get. But I'm looking forward to having it before the end of the year done or started.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Any other old business? Okay, new business. Any new business to come before the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to bring up an item of new business. And kind of back to what we were talking about with our committee structure, I would have rather present this in the committee before we brought it here to this dais, but nevertheless, here we are. I would like to propose the renaming of two of our sites after two of our leaders, our former executive director, Ms. Naomi Truman, who's the former executive director of the Housing Authority of the Birmingham District, served admirably also as the deputy executive director and legal counsel for the Housing Authority of the Birmingham District. Ms. Naomi Truman was the first and the only African-American female and the first and only female to serve as executive director of the Housing Authority of the Birmingham District in its inception since 1937. So with that being said, I know that there may be some discussion around this, but I'm prepared to move forward. I know this may be news to my colleagues, so the discussion I think should be had. In addition to that, I also would like to consider renaming Roosevelt City after President Bertha Davis, the president of the CPAB, the longtime president of CPAB and president of her community. So I am proposing to rename these sites. I understand that there may be some discussion, and I am willing to delay, making a resolution because I would like for us to have a robust discussion. And when I say robust discussion, I'm not saying we had to be here all day. I know time is of the essence, but this is something that I would have preferred to discuss in the committee. But I would, at this point, I feel compelled to move forward with the discussion today.
Mhm.
And with that being said, I will turn the floor back over to you.
Great. Commissioner Davis, first of all, thank you for bringing that before the board. I think anytime that we are renaming any of our communities, buildings, rooms, programs after somebody, it is a really big deal. And certainly somebody like Ms. Naomi Truman and Ms. Bertha Davis have done excellent work, I think, for HABD and have made an impact here. I think my thoughts are, I would love for us to put together a process around when opportunities like this come up, to be able to name, any of our communities, buildings, rooms, programs, that we have a process in place. And I would like to see that process on a regular basis, maybe even an annual process to where at a certain time in the year, maybe it's October, November, we accept nominations for renaming of any of our inventory. And then we have a committee based on staff, leadership, residents, and maybe even stakeholders in the community. And then I think we need to take an inventory of what all we have right now that's already been named, and then things that could be named going forward. And again, having a really good cross-section of our stakeholders that are part of that process. That being said, I would love to see us put together that process sooner than later. And then go forward with these names, Miss Bertha Davis and Miss Naomi Truman, to figure out where in our inventory these naming opportunities should be. And then going forward, what is kind of like the hierarchy of things that be named? I think the top level would be an actual community, and that probably could be something like a Lifetime Achievement Award. But then a building may be another level, and then a room within a building could be another level. So that's my initial thoughts, and I would love to entertain other thoughts from our commissioners.
I'm happy to hop in too. Well, I think there's two things that I'm pretty sure we could all agree on. One is Ms. Truman and Ms. Davis being nominated are, excellent choices. I mean, I don't think there's any dispute about the contributions and the legacies that they have left and are still that are here today. So that from that perspective, I'm on board with, evaluating how we want to proceed with this and in whatever structure or format that we all decide. The second thing is, I think something you brought up about wishing that it had been in a committee meeting, that sort of setting, and I could see why. And I think that maybe goes to Chairman Hood's point, is that, we've got just so many opportunities and probably, obviously various levels of contributions throughout, the history of our organization. So I do think it would be nice to have a process in place, maybe that is, determined by a committee that, again, I wouldn't want to punt this to the spring or anything. I would presume that we would do this quickly. But, having a process in place maybe once a year where we do take, consideration to these items, and so that we can then maybe have more of a strategic plan in that regard. I mean, that makes it sound more robust than it should be, but the idea though would just be to have that sort of discussion ongoing, and then kind of have a cutoff date every year where we look at our inventory and also, out of respect for those communities and buildings and names that are still on our, on our sites. And I think, I'd be remiss pointing out that maybe I don't know every single name on every single building that we have. And I would think that would be something we'd want to include in our process to make sure that we're not removing somebody's name who we want to keep in our, organization's naming roles. So I think just those two things would be my thoughts. I'm on board with the names that have been presented and would love to continue that dialogue and think we should do so shortly.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your thoughts, Chairman and Commissioner Pantazis. I would like to make a couple points moving forward. And let me say this, I really do support a process if that's the pleasure of this board. Yes, I would like to move expeditiously, but I would support a process. So I'm not against the process. I would just like to make a couple points that we don't have any legal restraints. We've set a precedent. We've named Morel Todd Homes, so that was something we've done recently. We made sure that there were no legal parameters. And so, Attorney French, there are no legal parameters that we've already, gone down that path. So there wouldn't be anything that would hold us back from that aspect, from a legal aspect. But I would like to make a couple historic points. To my knowledge, and I'm not a historian of the Housing Authority of the Birmingham District, but from what I understand, we've never had a site named after a female in the history of this agency. And I think it's quite shameful. I really do. I think it's shameful that we've never had a site that has been named after a female, for all these years. And we've had so many females that have come through this agency and have done a great work. And so that's something that I think we during this process, maybe we can look at how we can be more equitable, and quite honest with you, and frankly, we have very few sites that are named after people of color. And I'm not trying to make this out of some type of, color line or anything along those lines, but the facts are the facts.
Mhm.
If you go down the list of each one of these sites, you will find that very few are named after African Americans or people of color. And we've never had one named after a female. So that's very concerning to me. And that's part of the reason why I am so anxious, if you will, to try to affect some change so we can kind of right some wrongs, if you will.
I think those are great points.
Absolutely. Commissioner Lewis, do you have anything to add? Oh, Vice Chairwoman Lewis, excuse me.
Actually, I agree. In the history of the HABD, I agree with all the points that Chairman Davis made and Mr. Fantasia. I go with the process, but right now I see no legal restraints that we can't move forward, on this point. I agree with everything. So if you want to move forward, I'm in agreement with that. And for us to process, I'm in agreement with that too. If we want to go on down the line and make it a yearly process or something that we want to look into, I agree with that. So,
Please.
I totally agree with that also, and I think it is important, especially as we look and focus on our goals to reposition our various communities, how we look at that and focus and think about which communities are we repositioning, what will the possible names be later on as we reposition them. And a lot of times, and just so in general sense, when housing authorities reposition a community and reposition for those that may not understand it is whether it's tearing it down, selling it off, getting rid of it, the names change at that point, right? And so whatever decisions we make, let's make sure we, focus on, if we name a development, a current community after someone, then we tear it down in a year, So let's just think through all that kind of stuff too. That's the only thing I want to just put on. So whenever we make those decisions.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I think that there needs to be some thought that goes into it. However, I really feel like if it's the pleasure of this board to move forward with a name change, and I'm sure we can sit down with our legal team and put some things in place to make sure that, if the property does change hands, then we can make sure that we have something in place where we can keep the name, or what have you. So, but I'm willing to listen, and I think that, moving forward, if we went ahead and let's say we looked at a couple of sites and, we were concerned about repositioning and name change, then I really think that we really should get with our legal team and see how we could put some things in place where when the name changes, if the site changes hands, if we sell the site off, then we will still maintain the name.
I think those are good points. It puts me in the mind of like Jordan Hare Stadium and Bryant Denny, or
Right.
even Jackson Nolan. Like, some things have already been named. Like in the future, if we wanted to add a name, would it be a split name, or would a name be removed and another name comes on? So again, I think having a process in place so we can kind of decide up front how we do this, and also taking an inventory of what we already have, I think would be great. So my thoughts are, I would be supportive and encouraging of us asking Mr. Northern to go ahead and put together a committee and a process, one that you, Commissioner Davis, would be a part of. Let's put a process in place with the idea that by the end of the year, we will have a process in place that, hopefully we can take Ms. Truman and Ms. Davis through this process to identify which properties or whatever in our inventory would be the proper naming for them.
Well, and I would support that that piece, but I would make one change to it. I would think that the chairman of the board should be working along with the president and CEO to put this committee together. So I would be in favor of you, along with Mr. Northern, putting this committee together.
That's fair.
I think that sounds good. I'd love to hear back pretty soon on kind of what that's going to look like, along with the other committees that we're talking about. Let's we can get to work pretty quickly on all that, I think.
And I will say this, Mr. Chairman, and I understand that we got a lot going on, and you know, we're busy, but I really would like to move on this as soon as possible. I don't want a long delay.
Yeah.
I would like, to be honest with you, I would like for us to come up with some type of timeline today. If it's 30 days or 60 days, you know, let's just kind of, hammer something out, because I just don't want to feel like that we're kicking the can down the road.
Mhm.
And, then the spring is here and then nothing's been done. So I would just like to go on the record and try to see if we can put something in place as far as a timeline, to have this committee set up, give them an opportunity to do their due diligence and to provide a recommendation back to this board.
Mhm.
I support the commissioner on that. I was listening in the car. I don't think y'all could see me on the thing, forgive my tardiness, but I do think that I was gonna ask a question, a clarified question. When you did, or when you all moved the name change for the Tide homes or that area, how long did that process take? Just in terms of determining, who was gonna be named and all of that? And if we're looking at our process, can we mirror that? Is that a good way to determine how long it should take for us to do this? Or I do agree that, if there hasn't been a process, I don't want to wait, till next year
Right.
to put forth these worthy women. But I'm just interested in what the process, or just how long did it take?
Right. So the process took about 30 days.
Okay.
It wasn't a long process, and it wasn't a well-structured process, to be quite honest with you. It was just me getting on the phone, calling my colleagues and asking for their support. That's what the process was. It was something that I thought was worthy of, of Commissioner Todd, and I lobbied my colleagues, and that's how it came about.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if we were to put together this committee and a proposed kind of plan within 60 days? And then in that plan, hopefully there would be within a 30-day window or 60-day window, whatever date that, if we're choosing the yearly date that we're going to do this, maybe after that, that's when the presentation of, motion of sorts could be made. And that would put us, October to maybe have a vote on this sort of thing.
Just so I'm clear, is the vote on the plan or the names? Just so that we can,
The
Yeah.
names would be by 90 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the committee gets together and say, I'm not going to make the decision for the committee, because the whole point of having the committee is for the committee to do it.
right,
But, maybe with that in mind, if we're putting this together, let's shoot for that. If we get together and we look at, or the committee gets together and says, hey, looking at this inventory, also looking at kind of the strategic plan of repositioning some sites, like we need to take a little more time to figure this out, so be it. But I think we all agree that maybe making this happen a little sooner rather than later is in the best interest of, getting things done now as opposed to later, basically.
Okay, so are we saying we have to wait on the committee to move forward on this issue here?
I would presume the committee would put together a slate of proposed name changes or recognitions in front of the board to vote on. And that way you would have a diligence process that we would look at our inventory, our history, and nominations made by either commissioners or other individuals in the community that we need to address. And then after that, so, again, 60 days, they give us kind of their protocol. And then after that, hopefully, we take Commissioner Davis's suggestion and put these names forward and see how that fits into the protocol. And if we can get a vote on it within 30 days, then awesome. But if the committee comes back with some different recommendations, that's part of the process too.
Well, and I would support that, and now it still wouldn't change my motion if the committee came back with a recommendation not to do it, then I'm still going to push forward. And I'm not afraid of a vote not in there, but an affirmative if that's the pleasure of this board. So I'm going forward with the motion regardless of what the committee says.
so is there a motion on the floor right now? Because I did miss.
Yes, my thoughts are too.
Yeah. My understanding is that Commissioner Davis brought this up for discussion. I don't think there is an official motion.
Got it.
But what I'm hearing is that we will take affirmative action today to go forward with starting a committee. And within 60 days, we can have a process in place. And then within that time, or by the end of that period, then we will have an official motion or whatever that looks like to rename, whatever we consider these communities, and taking these two names in consideration with the intent that this will be done by the end of the year.
Okay.
I think, quite frankly, I think that gives Mr. Northern time to continue with the other time-sensitive things. I think with putting our strategic plan together in place and, aligning our leadership with whatever goals and stuff and the vision that we have right now. Since this is not a time-sensitive thing, I think we can take our time, but not kick the can down the road again. 60 days, and then by the end of the year, have a decision with the intent of having this done by the end of the year.
Well, I understand that there are other things that may, take more importance. I still think it's time sensitive in my mind.
That's what I'm saying. So just to be clear, I am with moving forward today
Right.
with putting a committee together today
Okay.
that we can go ahead and stand this committee up.
Okay,
So
very
let me
good.
just clarify that.
Very good,
Yeah,
very good.
yeah.
I just want to make sure we all, well, I hope we're on the same page. If not,
We're on the same page and we're on the record.
right. So time is of the essence for me. I don't want this to delay,
Yeah.
past the first of the year, what have you. I think, we've got some very smart people here. I think we can walk and chew bubble gum. And so I think we can do multiple things that are of importance. So, I would support a 60-day process
Mhm.
to put this committee together and have it functioning.
Mhm.
And hopefully by October, we can come back to the table with a motion.
I think that's a good way to look at it.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, just as we're getting all these committees together, this can be kind of one of those top priorities of getting it rolling.
So we develop a format to create a committee, develop a process or types, and then leave that open space for others, because things may come up. Come back in 60 days, the board will approve it. Once the board approve that committee process plan, then we start addressing possible name changes. That's
No, that's not the way I understood it. The way I understood it is that we're giving you the chairman of this board is giving you the authority to move forward with a process. Right? That's the way I understood it, that we were going to give you and Mr. Northern, we're going to move forward with a nominating committee process. I want to come back before this board.
Okay.
We're talking about it right now.
I think that's a fair way to do it. I don't think there's a need to approve the process. I think
Right.
we'll defer to the committee's interest on that. And, it's not one of those things that would be super set in stone, I would imagine. So we can, come back and have discussions if needed.
And what I see is 60 days from now, then we have an official motion to say, these are the names, we have a process in place. Let's go from there. Does that
I'll be
sound
with-
right, Attorney French?
I'll be willing to support that.
I support it.
Now, assuming we get it set, the committee set pretty soon, within 30 days,
We're
really.
not taking.
We can have maybe an update next meeting about how's the process going? Are we making progress on it or not?
All right, perfect. Does that sound reasonable, Mr. Northern?
Yes. So I have an update next board meeting.
Okay,
Very good. I'm good. I'm
great.
good.
All right. Thank you. Any other new business to come before the board?
No real new business here. I just wanted to congratulate all of the youth and all the young people that have been doing all of our camps and our 77 football and all that cool stuff. I love keeping up on social media and seeing a lot of the cool things that have been going on. And I just applaud everyone's efforts and getting everyone out and active. And I know it's probably been a real nice time to get back together and do some stuff. But it seems like it's been a productive summer in a lot of ways. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, and I would like to echo those sentiments. It's a lot going on. I did get the opportunity to go by the pep rally for the 7-on-7 flag tournament, and it was just a festive time. So kudos to you, Mr. Northern, and what you're doing in the community, your staff. Anybody that knows me knows how much I love football, and that was really near and dear to my heart to see those kids out there having fun and men leading the way like yourself and some others, Mr. Matthews, and I know I'm leaving somebody out, Coach Hall, and some others that were out there coaching. And so that just really, really, really made my heart feel good to see our kids out there, participating amongst some of the best in the country, and to see our men, more specifically our African-American men, leading the way. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. There's no other new business. We'll move to the president and CEO's report.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And since you did bring up some of the activities, I just start in that area. We have an amazing team of people here working, and partnerships that we're able to develop is so important. And the camp with Mario Addison was a great opportunity. We had our young men and our young women cheer and dance and football. We had a great time. Hundreds of kids was out there from all age groups. The flag football also, the collaboration, it happened kind of overnight, right? It's something that we want to do. Would you mind helping spearhead it? NFL has a new goal of reaching underserved communities, and so we made it happen. And so our teams, we had 3 teams in it that was sponsored by NFL, the Dolphins, which is my team, because I'm a Dolphins fan.
Oh my.
The Cardinals and the Arizona Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers. And we, our team did an amazing job putting the banquet together. The parents was there in support at the banquet and at the games. And it was just an amazing time. And as a result of that, we did win a game. We hadn't even practiced. We won a game and competed. We won our first game. We blew the team out, actually. And all these teams was travel teams that have been together forever. So we put a team of young men together and was really able to compete out there. And if we'd have had a week or 2 of practice, we'd be in the Super Bowl. That's how good these young people were and how well they was able to listen to the leadership that we provided. And that's why I feel like it's really important that we do things like that, not just with football or basketball, but with all type of sports. But when we have partners that's willing to bring funds to the table and make this possible for our young people is really important. Now, as a result of that, the NFL saw that having just coming to Birmingham and using the housing authority as a facilitator to reach young people, now they want to do this across the nation. So our next step, we're planning a summit here, and we're going to invite in Montgomery, Mobile, Huntsville, Bessemer, Jefferson County, Selma, housing authorities down, some of their staff and some of their young people, and talk about how we focus on access opportunities, and then train the kids and the staff on the rules. And this wasn't a 7-on-7, it was a 5-member football, but also for our young ladies also. We didn't have a females team, but that's our next step to make sure we get our young ladies out there to participate. And at the end of that brief summit, to have a game, friendly competition between housing authorities and the young people, but also branch this out. And we've been talking and working on how utilizing this across the nation and contacting other housing authorities. Because as you said before, when people on social media, the media put it out there, a lot of people in housing called me and was like, man, how did you do this? We want to be a part of this. So I think it'll be big, not just for our housing authority, but for the country in terms of underserved populations. But one of the things I mentioned to the NFL, I really want to focus on, one, continually ensuring that we have the parent support, but also incorporate books and education in it. When I went to college, we had sports and then we had study tables, right? And so trying to make sure we incorporate that leadership, the education, the building a whole holistic type person in a sense versus just athletic opportunity. So and they said they all for that. So I'm really excited about that, how this opportunity is able to come about.
Appreciate that.
Leading into that, we had a joint meeting with the other housing authorities in the county, well, just Jefferson County and Bessemer. And I was surprised they said we had never sat down and had a discussion together. It was the first time. Our team had put that meeting together where we needed to start discussing on how we operate as one unit. There's no need to have different policies and plans across borders when we utilize the same borders, same staff in a sense. same resources. So we want to, build more alliances and partners together. And that was a great opportunity to meet with them. Going back to a few items that I just wanted to highlight, knowing that I provided a executive director's, president, CEO's report to you guys in writing ahead of time. I just want to continually welcome our new executive leadership team. Ms. Foster, who has been at the House Authority for a number of years. She's our current chief of staff now. Michael Jones, who's lived in Birmingham for a few years and come from an area of CPA education. He's a professor at Alabama A&M, but also an auditor. He's our new chief financial officer, and he also has a CPA. And then Steph Emery from the DC area. He's a policy analyst at FADA. Currently he worked for us, but he was a policy analyst at FADA. And me being a national president of the Public Housing Authority Directors Association, where he came from, I took a little heat, but I think we got a great person here. He's going to bring some great skill sets so we can lead our team into the future for the benefit of our clients and the community we serve. So I'm just really excited to have that as we continually move in terms of reposition our organization, really have them on the ground. Seth also worked in operations through housing authorities. Before he went to FADA, he worked as a consultant for one of the major consulting groups. So he know how. So when just like myself, when we talk about policy and direction, it's not something that we never did. We did that stuff. We started at the bottom and worked our way up. So I'm really excited about the future of the organization and how we move forward. Also, we had a virtual staff meeting where I was able to introduce my executive leadership team to the overall staff, both permanent and temporary staff. That went over well. We gave the opportunity for staff members to submit questions and concerns ahead of time so they can be addressed, knowing we have a large number of people. And so all the questions and concerns was addressed by our team members or myself on that call for everybody to hear. Going down the line, we had a meeting with all the housing authorities. The Alabama bond pool is a pool of housing authorities that invested together. We was able to pay off that bond, and we'll receive a check after August 4th. So can't remember the right amount of the check, but we were receiving a decent check as a result of the savings. All the house authorities got together and was able to get that bond taken care of. Working and using our partnerships, the city of Birmingham really came to our support. They gave us $820,000 to help with our CARES Act delinquency eviction moratorium. And why that's so important is that once the eviction moratorium is up, we have to look at who's not been paying rent and to terminate them as a landlord, right? And so that means no income for the housing authority. That means if we have to terminate people, we got to pay legal fees and things like that to terminate them. That means if people were terminated, we have to rehab those units. So that's more cost. And so that savings that really was focused on making sure people stay in house and really help the housing authority long term, more than just paying off some delinquent payments. So we're in the process of working through how do we get those paid for, and also we're working with the city to look at additional funding that possible to help with some of our Section 8 and voucher participants also. So I'll keep you guys up to date with that. But that was a big win for the organization and our clients. The CPAB board, they had the resident-owned business. Keith Swaney from Motivational Inc. came on site, did the training so they can solidify their resident-owned business. And we're having some discussions now about how they can start operating. We came up with some unique opportunities to help them start early without putting a lot of burden on them, right? And so I'm very excited about that, and I'm pretty sure on the CPAB board is excited about that also. We talked last time when they were having some issues related to getting their funding, related to the tenant funds that they receive annually from the housing authority and that process. And we're working hard to make sure we solidify that process and make it a little easier for them. But what we did do is we went back to 2017, and everybody that had a legal board, a legal resident council received funding all the way back. So some of them missed funding, never got their funding, was keep asking for it. So we paid it off. We met with them, we talked to them, we passed the checks out. They follow the current guidelines. So I'm pretty sure they're pretty excited about it. It was a substantial amount of money, but that they can utilize for moving their organizations forward at the local level. We held a joint news conference with City Hall, the Mayor Wolfen, Crime Stoppers, ATF, and a number of the faith leaders in the community, and that was around stopping some of the gun violence. And it really has helped our efforts. Not only were we able to highlight our added cameras, lighting, and license plate readers. But that $25,000 that we use to support Crime Stoppers was focused on some of the young people that was murdered on our properties. And so with that being said, there's been a whole lot of communication around it, even with our plan that our relocation policy plan that we put in place back in February, how the police and the state's attorneys and people can help utilize that to solve some of these major crimes. So that's something that's very exciting. I talked earlier about how our murders, I think we had maybe one murder on our property since we announced that. Before, every week was getting people shot constantly. There's been a few shootings, but nothing that's substantial. Most of them have been domestic violence type related. And we know stuff gonna happen, right? People getting shot and people getting robbed in Hollywood. So it's going to happen, but by decreasing that opportunity for violence to happen and occur on our properties is something that's very exciting for the House Authority and the city and our clients overall. We received $15,000 from for our summer youth program from the city, from Councilman Hoyt. We had our RFQs go out for our developers. We received 14 proposals, RFQs that came back for our development opportunities. Again, that goes back to what we talked about a little earlier about repositioning our properties. I think we didn't require them to submit it on a particular property. They had the option to pick whether they brought land that they had already. They looked at some of our properties that we had. Out of the 14, they presented that they was interested in 32 various development projects, right? And so that's just the first phase of what we need to do. So that's something that's really exciting. I think it's going to go in line with what we're planning now. One of the local banks that really want to focus on utilizing their funding in the right way is willing to host a housing summit. And, my hopes is that housing summit will bring some community stakeholders and partners and residents in, and let's have breakouts and really look at the planning for affordable housing in Birmingham overall long term. And as a result of that, I think we can pull together what we talked about and discuss a plan for transformation. Major cities throughout the country have plans for transformation when they talk about affordable housing or housing authorities. Right now, what we do is kind of piecemeal. When it's a need, when something come up, we deal with it. We really need a plan in place. So regardless who's the board chair, who's the president, CEO, who's the mayor, the people know it's a plan in place, and we can point resources and partners for that. Once if we know a grocery store is coming and we need affordable housing in this area, let's make sure all of the lines are laid, at the time we already in the ground, doing things like that so we can just think holistically as a team. I think that's something that's important. Atlanta has the One Atlanta plan. DC Housing Authority had the plan for transformation. Chicago had the plan for transformation. And I really think it's important that we move in that direction to get a solidified plan. And so you're right, we have a lot of work to do, but it's a lot of great stuff that's happening and going on.
So I know there's been a lot of interest in the RFQ and the vouchers.
Yes.
Any idea timeline when applicants will hear back on that?
We're in an evaluation process now. Ms. Foster, do you know our goal to have that evaluation done? At the end of next week, the evaluations will be done of all the RFQs, and we'll be notifying the various individuals of the next steps. Oh, yeah. So we have to do interviews with all of our developers also. So in a couple of weeks, we'll know. So we'll have an update to the board for certain by our next board meeting, but we'll be contacting and working with the various developers over the next couple of weeks, finishing up the evaluations. Let's see what we have next. We're continually working in promoting the need for individuals to get vaccinated and working with local partners, community members, health department that's providing vaccination opportunities for not just our clients, but our staff member families, and anybody in the community that's willing to receive the vaccination. We think that's something that's really important. As we see right now, especially here in Alabama, it's really hitting hard again. And so we need to really focus on making sure that we're doing the right things related to that. Along with that, we had ordered new uniforms for our maintenance staff that's in the trenches on a daily basis, that's in and out the units. The new uniforms are in. We ordered a number of the uniforms. I think we ordered 6 sets of uniforms for the maintenance department. And a lot of that was aligned with, especially during COVID, they in and out of these units. We wanted to have them enough uniforms so that they can be safe and also keep our clients safe also as they work and do some of the jobs that they have. As far as the Office of Constituent Concerns, we're doing a really good job with that also. Since we started the office in February, we've had over 400 plus concerns that came in, and with an average rate of return in terms of the 48 hours responding to individuals is 98% average rate in terms of people getting their responses. And again, some of the responses they may not want to hear, but we respond. And so that conception of nobody can get in touch with us, that we won't follow up is out of there. And again, we get the opportunity to get all the complaints and concerns, who they talk to, when was it taken care of, and then we can go through it and really track it and plan for the future, whether it's training we need, whether it's more messaging we need, whatever it is that we need to do to help solidify and resolve some of the concerns before they are concerns we want to work toward. And so along with myself, the whole executive leadership team receives it. So we are reviewing it together as a team to kind of point what our directions are. Last week, a couple weeks ago, we met with Nan McCain Associates, who were looking at as a possible partner to do our training center. We're doing a training center here so that we can ensure that our clients, well, our staff members are trained and cross-trained on all kind of housing opportunities and positions. And it's also important for housing authority staff, not just to know about public housing, but also the voucher program in other ways, whether it's an opportunity to learn what really happens at a housing authority and what's going on, not just in your area, but an opportunity to move along that spectrum of other job opportunities. Every time I've set up a training center with a housing authority that I've been in, it's been really successful. And we always set aside a number of seats, one for other housing authorities in the area to come, because it's more cost efficient to bring a trainer in and train 30 people than send 2 people. It's probably the same cost to send 2 people to California. And so we can really get our bang for our buck, but also we set some seats aside for other housing authorities that can pay to help us offset the cost, but have some seats for our clients, building employment opportunities for our clients, giving them those opportunities. Just for one example, in Champaign, we had our training center. We trained clients to as inspectors. The Small Business Association worked with them, helped them develop business plans. So they did the inspections on our low-income housing tax credits property. So we helped them create themselves as their own businesses. So doing things like that would really help our community overall. And I'm looking really forward to that training center coming. Last few things I just want to mention. We talked about looking at having a housing summit, having a holistic plan that's a partnership with the city and the various partners throughout, as we focus on housing and transformation of our housing authority into the future. But our strategic plan and our business plan is something that we're still moving forward with. So there's a lot of planning going on, but I think that's something that's important. And when we talk about this plan into the future, it's not nothing that can't be changed, but we already know the direction that we want to go in and as a group. So I think that's something that's important. The messaging, our team is doing an amazing job pulling information together, ensuring that our message is getting out to the community. You probably noticed there's been a number of interviews by the press that they're excited about some of the things that we're doing, or just getting the real information out. And that's something that's going very well. But one thing that we're looking at also is the economic impact the housing authority have on this community. Right? A lot of times people look at housing authorities as eyesores and problem childs in their communities, but it's not the case. So we ran some early numbers, and I think it was like 300 million plus of income that our clients provide into this community, which bounces over and over, plus our close to $100 million budget, all our landlords that we're paying, all the materials we're purchasing. So, and I like to make sure people understand it and get it out. And so that they know if a housing authority was removed from a community, that community will suffer. Right. So we play a vital role in the ecosystem of this community. I want to make sure that we pull those figures together. So not just our clients know how important they are to this community. Some of them are workers, some of them may not have that ability to work for whatever reason, but housing authorities play a vital role in all communities. And
Just to be clear, I know some organizations do like a annual, or maybe every 2-3 years, they do like an economic impact report they put on the website. Is that what you're kind of envisioning?
Yes.
Okay. I like that.
We already starting to put some numbers together and work with our partners here in the city. For that, lastly, I just want to mention that we completed our refinancing of the energy performance contract. which was, a great opportunity to provide savings and move our projects forward. When we started that EPC, energy performance contract, EPC, when we started the EPC, the interest rate was 3.3%. Our refinance rate is 1.7%, and we changed the payment format so we'll pay it off faster. So we saving close to 400,000 plus as a result of that, along with, throughout the years of energy cost savings and upgrades over 3 million. And so that's another big win for our organization as we continually look at some of our current practices, our current partners that we have. We've talked about how we're changing our insurance company. We talked about just really looking at our banking partners and seeing if it's savings that we can have. A lot of these partnerships or contracts have been in place for a long time. So just taking a look at some of that. We looked at maybe changes the way we do our software. Our current payroll system is we can go with ADP. Right now, we have like a patched up kind of system that we're working that's not that efficient. ADP is a system that's already there. And when we looked at the cost of ADP versus what we're paying now, it's, I think, a $5,000 a month savings almost. Even Mr. Jones, we talked about how we're still sending out hard checks to landlords and people like that, right? Automating that, buying all these checks, we're paying for postage, then people got to stuff it. Sometimes it's a stuffing machine, but it's just a lot of excess waste, time, and energy that we're looking at really making these changes in the very near future. We're making some now, but it takes some time to get everything implemented. So I'm really excited how our team is responding to some of the requests that not just the board have, but I have in terms of making us work and be more efficient as an organization. And so if it's nothing else related to my particular report, unless there's any questions that the board members have, that's all I wanted to kind of highlight.
Chairman Hood.
Mhm.
So I just got one point back to the housing summit. There was a housing summit conducted back in 2017, I believe. And I'm sure there's a copy of that, a summary of that summit. It was a very well put together summit. There's a lot of good information that took place at that summit. And I think it would be very helpful moving forward for the next summit to maybe revisit some of the things that we did at the last housing summit. So I just wanted to point that out.
Was that hosted by us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It
I
was hosted.
have a
Yeah.
copy of the report.
Right. Okay. Okay. Very good. Okay. All right.
I do have one just follow-up question. I'm aware that the schools are going back on August 2nd, and I wanted to know if there are any plans or anything in place as we're looking at that for our housing students who are going back. Or is there anything we should be supporting? Anything coming up that's on your radar for the beginning of school?
Well, we have, we recently got a contract with GPS, and they're doing some assessments and things for us. Our community engagement team is working, really hard. But if there's anything that come up that we need to focus on related to our young people going back to schools, we'll make sure that we get right on top of that. And I know we have some meetings set up pretty soon coming up with the school district and the school board also.
Okay.
Offhand, I don't know anything that we need to be aware of unless any of my team members know that. So.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Northern. Financial services report. And first and foremost, Mr. Jones, thank you. Welcome to HABD. Feel free to begin your report. Just, introducing yourself, any words you might want to add before you start your report.
Thank you, Chairman Hood. Thank you to the other commissioners. Thank you to Mr. Northern and the selection committee for deeming my skill set best in show for the other 15 candidates that applied for this position. I concur with that decision. I think that there are a lot of great opportunities here that Mr. Northern spoke about for improving efficiencies, and we'll get into that later. I'm new to public housing, but I'm not new to executive level finance and accounting. I've got a long history of higher education, executive finance experience. More recently, certified public accounting experience with a regional firm who actually audited PHAs, public housing authorities. Still keep my foot in higher education. I always maintain an adjunct accounting course to teach, to keep your knife sharp, so to speak. But I'm glad to be here. There are a lot of great people. The team is intact. We just need to tighten up some things and move forward. So again, thank you all. So, excuse me. So we're going to start today. We're going to talk about the presentation of the cumulative low income report and financial statements. We're going to ask for an approval of the charge offs for May and June. We're going to talk about the CARES Act. We're going to give an update on that. And then we're going to talk about these opportunities Mr. Northern spoke about for cost savings and efficiencies and how we can start to bring some of our revenue back in versus lowering some expenses. And then we'll give you an update on the status of our audit.
We also trying some new things related to reporting and how we present our report. So
Y'all fancy?
Right. I noticed that a little earlier. It's like, movement.
Mr. Northern gave the charge that this meeting had to be PowerPoint ready. So thanks to the staff for really working late to get this thing done. So kudos to those individuals. Okay, so we're going to do some financial highlights first, okay? So on the HABD revenue and expense low income budget for the 11 months ended May 31st, we're at a targeted percentage of 91.67%. I'm reading from the report that you all, the commissioners, should have. So this being the 11th month of a 12-month fiscal year, we would expect the targeted percentage to be 91%. Okay, so and then there are going to be a number of items that in the percent column have deviated from their targeted percentage, and those we will discuss in detail. So initially, we're just going to do a highlight of the revenues and expenses, then we'll come back and detail the ones that were off target. Again, this is for the 11th month period ended May 31st, 2021. Our revenues, actual revenues through May 31st, 2021, 37.9 million versus the budget of 41.36 million. That's going to give us a variance of 3.7 million. But with one more month left in this 12-month period, that should be attainable. We should be able to meet that target, and we should pull all that revenue in close to about 98%. It gives us a collection percentage on our revenue at this point of 92%. Our expenses came in at 36.1 million versus the expense budget of 40.9 million. That leaves us a variance of 4.7 million, and that percentage is only 88%. Now, these are the areas that we're going to explain further because there are some reasons why the expenditures are lower in their target than they should be at this time of year. So if we go into those now, well, let me finish this summary. So the revenue and expenses are going to give us a net income or loss for the first 11 months of this year of 1.8 million versus the budget, as you can see here, is 441,000. So those numbers look way off. But the reason that is the budget is done through cost accounting versus accrual, cost basis accounting versus accrual accounting. So cost basis does not include items that we have accrued but not paid for yet. So at the end of the year, we book all of our accruals, and these numbers will be closer together, the actual versus budget on the net income and loss. Okay. Again, these numbers are in millions, and we must state here that these financials are intended for internal management purposes only. They have not been audited, so they're not to be disseminated outside of here until they're actually audited, then they're publicly acceptable. Okay. So now let's talk about the items that are, there are 13 items that are askew from their target, from where they should be at this time of year. So if you look at the first two items that I'm going to look at under the revenue section, the MOD inspector salaries and the force account, they are off. As you can see, MOD is only 40% collected or on target versus it should be closer to 91% at this time of the year.
are you speaking from the report that you provided?
Yes.
or is it a
The
slide?
details are going to be in what these are not on slide.
Okay. all right.
These are what the commissioner should have in their packet. And so MOD inspector salaries and force account are not on target due to the fact that there are a couple of positions not filled. And this is all due to the pandemic's response, our response to the pandemic and the inability to hire individuals at that time. Okay. If you move further down, insurance proceeds are way over. As you can see, we're 310% versus a 91% target. And the reason for that skew is that we did receive insurance proceeds for the roof replacement for Collegeville. So those monies came in lump sum. They obviously were not budgeted, so it threw the budgeted actual off as if we really received more than budgeted. If they had been budgeted properly, this would be a level playing field for that particular line item. Now let's look at the expenses. These are the variances in the expenses that were off skew of the 91%. These are mainly going to be due to COVID restrictions. So if you'll see items 4, 5, and 6 detail that legal was only 25% of what should have been 91% at this time of year. Training and travel only accumulated 14% of what should have been 91% at this time of year. And other administrative costs was 78% of what should have been 91. Reason for that is, of course, now with the eviction moratorium still in place, our eviction rates are lower. That means our legal fees are going to be lower at this time of year. That explains that 25% versus 91. Training and travel, the same thing. Employees were not in the office. Administration was not in place physically on site. So there was no training and travel, a very minimal amount of training and travel attributed to in-office working. That's why that's only 14.7% at the 11th of the 12th month of the year. Same thing with other administrative costs. All these costs are associated with the shelter in place order and employees not being on site, actually driving these expense numbers up. Okay. Let's look at tenant services. So here, tenant services, you'll see we're only 69% on participation, resident participation, and the others are only 22%. Well, that's because actually at the 11th month of this year, the sites had not received their funds, their participation funds. But since then, in fact, on July 1, those checks were distributed. And so now this number will come into place by next board meeting, and by the June report, those numbers will come into play because those numbers were expended after May. So at this stage, those checks had not been expended. Therefore, those expenditures were much lower than budgeted. But that will catch up. As I just said, July 1st, those expenditures were made. Okay. Under utilities. Now, in this case, electric and sewage, all those were higher than budgeted. And that again is due to COVID and the shelter in place policy. And so more residents and all of us were at home using more utilities. My bills ran up at home. I was glad when the kids went back to school. So the utilities went up. Okay. And so, but what we have done is to, thank you so much. Excuse me. So to be sure that it is just the pandemic that they're up and not any other problem, as Mr. Northern mentioned, we have engaged energy performance contract consultants to check on efficiencies to make sure that this is due to extra use per stay at home and not some inefficiencies in operations of our facilities and our utilities. They also engaged to find savings in efficiencies. And so that's going to come back and bring us windfalls that are going to help reduce those high utility bills. If you go down to maintenance, you're going to have the same situation here under the materials line. You're only targeting 64% in the 11th of the 12th month of the year. Again, there was not a lot of construction being done. There were not a lot of materials being used internally. So that number would be lower than normal in a normal year, absent COVID in the 11th month. Okay. If you go down to protective services, you'll see that our contract costs were budgeted at 2.1 million. We've only expended 1.5 million. We are waiting on invoices that have not been received yet. And so at this point, we can't book them until they're received, but a couple of them have come in since this report was printed. And so that number will fall in line as the invoices are received and we ultimately pay them out. General expenses fall in line with other administrative expenses. All those expenses are going to be affected by COVID. Without employees in-house, then the general administrative expenses are going to be low as well. Same thing with collection of bad debt. Let's look at other general expenses. So collection of lost bad debt, that was only 62%. Again, with this moratorium, rents were not being collected. There was a moratorium on a lot of collection efforts. And so those numbers are going to be down, all again due to the pandemic and the policies that were implemented because of such. Okay. All right. So that covers our low income revenue and expense budget. Let's go to, we'll talk about ask this board to approve our charge offs for the months of May and June. And in May, charge offs for rent totaled 4.7 million. No, I'm sorry, 4,706. And then charge offs for maintenance and legal charges uncollected, 1,118. And charge offs for May for minus the security deposits that we have on hand gives us a total charge off for May of $5,185 uncollectible. If we look at those same numbers for June, we're going to see $22,000 in rent. We're going to see $4,000 in maintenance and legal charges against $900 in security deposits on hand, with a total for June of 26.2 thousand. All right, so in asking to write off this total of 31,841, before we move the board for that, I'd like to add a caveat that we have engaged municipal intercept services to help collect on some of these uncollectible accounts. And they were able to bring us back $38,949. So we're actually asking to write off 31,000, but we've recuperated $38,949 of that uncollectible, of those uncollectible accounts. So generally accepted accounting principles say we must write them off first and then record the windfall second. But as you can see, we've already recouped the amount that we're asking to be written off.
Is that over time or
This is just for the month of June.
that's how much collections that we
From May-
received
from
from
May
that
and June,
company?
yes.
Yeah. So those are old write-offs that we have, that once we write them off, and it's a financial
Collection
performance
agency,
kind
for lack of a
yeah.
better word.
Yeah.
So
Collection
they intercept state tax refunds. And so, and those dollars are redirected to us to help offset these uncollectible expenses.
And you know, I know the board's members are aware of this and a lot of the staff members, but you know, just for the public, we go through this write-off process. You know, it's an indicator related to financial management. We won't hold liabilities on too long. Get looked at bad from HUD by holding them on, but just so you know that even when we write them off, we still seek to try to recoup those funding for the housing.
Okay. And so we move for the board to accept our resolution to write those off.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the charge off for period ending May and June 2021.
Second.
Second,
It's been moved and properly second that we approve the charge offs for May and June 2021. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Item passes.
Yeah, ask two follow-ups real quick before we move on. And some of this may go into the CARES Act update too, but this is your first report to us. This is your first time looking at all these numbers. So, you're a fresh set of eyes on this, and that may be a good thing in a lot of ways, but also maybe you haven't had time to make these sorts of, opinions yet. But,
Sure.
looking at, let's go back to the low income report, and you don't have to bring it up, just focusing on it. Was there anything troubling in that report to you that you've seen?
Well, no, because all of the skewed numbers were due to the pandemic. Had this been a normal year, then yes, I would have some real serious questions about those off-target line items. But if you lay the pandemic on top of that year, then I'm really not really troubled with any of those numbers.
Okay, and you feel confident based on the, obviously, again, this may kind of tie into CARES Act or maybe some of the funding that Mr. Northern referred to in his report. Do you feel comfortable the direction we're headed to make up for pandemic-related losses based on the policies and, plans we have in place?
Well, absolutely. And so I can say here that with the target percent this year being 91%, of those three items that I mentioned, all other revenue targets were pretty much on target. So the revenues are coming in with Mr. Northern's and I'll get into this later, some of the savings that we're going to do and around operational efficiencies that are going to help bring some of that revenue back in. That will definitely increase these percentages for the 11th month of the year.
Okay, and that was kind of my second question, just areas that aren't troubling, but maybe you think we can pay some more attention to.
Oh,
to
yeah.
make
So I've got
some-
another, I'm going to talk about operational efficiencies and opportunities to redirect some of our resources based on savings. And we'll get into those areas that I've looked at. That'll be right after we finish the CARES Act.
Okay. And then my other question is the charge-offs, not no contention here with approving them, but the collection agency, how long have they been engaged?
I'm not sure. I just learned about them. Let me back up. So this is the beginning of my 4th week.
Yeah, right.
So
know
I
some of
do
this is
understand
quick,
that they
yeah.
are on board. I was glad to know that because when I saw the write-off number, I was disturbed about that. But then I saw, hey, we do have a collection agency and they are working. I know they've been here since the beginning of this year, but the exact date, I'd have to get that from staff.
Okay, and is there kind of modus operandi to only deal with the tax refunds, or do they go into other
The
avenues?
mine,
of debt
that's why they're
collection?
called municipal interceptions, because right now they're only doing the state tax refunds.
Yeah, Commissioner Pantas, if my memory serves me correctly, this entity has been on board for several years now. I can remember several years ago we moved forward with that process. So I want to say it's at least been 3 or 4 years. Yeah.
That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the low income financial statement before we move on to CARES Act?
I want to add something. As Mr. Jones said, and our team members, like I said before, we've been doing a great job. We had BDO as our financial consultant here, along with our development consultant, working together to really give us some recommendations. Sometimes when you're not looking at it for the purpose of finding the inefficiencies, you miss it. And having fresh eyes is good. And one of the things that we had did early on is in our capital fund program, HUD allows us, once we receive the money, to draw down 10% of our operations money. And so that helped offset something. So when we said that we provided the resident leaders their money from years ago, and we made sure it was capped off at 100% lease up rate, 100%, I think right now, we didn't prorate it, right? So HUD say, okay, if we only give you 96%, you only have to give them 96% of what you got to give them. So when we went back to provide the monies, we made everybody whole. We gave them 100% of the money, and we was able to do that because we drew down 12.2 million, I think it was, in operations that we should have been drawn down. It was just sitting there, right? And so doing things like that, ensuring that we utilize our flexibilities as an organization and understand how we can utilize our funding in the right way, we can get so much done. So that's just another example of how, one, we was able to get the resident leaders their monies, and two, bring that money down. It was something weird we were doing. We were only drawing 10% of every drawdown down versus the whole 10%. HUD says when you get the money, you draw the money down so you can use it for what you need it for. But so if we was drawing down $5,000, we was drawing 5% of that. I mean, 10% of that every time. So it was like wasting time, extra counting on it, and all that kind of stuff. So just finding ways to make life a little easier for our staff members, our team members, which will make life better for our clients.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Northern. So I had CARES Act pie charts, and so they were not acted right at the end. So I'm going to do this one. You won't have a chart for CARES Act. I'll give you an overview and an update. Excuse me. So public housing CARES Act expenditures are dollars that HUD provided to help our operations maintain at their normal level during this pandemic as well. We were awarded 4.7 million or 4.75 or $4.8 million. Of that, we have allocated 4.08 million in expenditures of that 4.8 million. That leaves us $669,000 that must be expended by December 31st, or they'll have to go back. Fortunately, though, we've already earmarked expenditures that will definitely, those dollars will be spent on. So we don't anticipate any of those dollars going back to HUD for non-use. Excuse me. On the Housing Choice Voucher CARES Act, the budget there, and we were allotted 1.37 or 1.4 million. Of that 1.4 million, we have expended 714,000, leaving us 660,000 or 661,000 to expend by December 31st as well. And in this case as well, we have earmarked expenditures that will be necessary to be used. And so I don't see any of those 661,000 having to be returned either. I will have a more detailed line item expenditure on the CARES Act by next board meeting, or if anyone needs it sooner than that, we can put it together. At this time, we were able to just give a highlight, an overview, and I can get into the details if anyone desires at a later date. You just let me know what you need to see in this area. Any questions on the CARES Act?
Could you just repeat the first number you gave? I got the second housing.
For
voucher number.
the Public Housing CARES Act,
Yes.
4.75 million was awarded. 4.01 has been expended. 4.08 has been expended, leaving 669,000 to be expended by December 31st.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other CARES Act questions? Okay, so now we're looking at some ways to have some cost savings. Looking at ways to bring more of our revenue in, keep our revenue home. Talking about cost cutting strategies. So we've identified some opportunities to reposition and increase revenues from cost cutting measures. Okay, Mr. Northern mentioned our, I don't like to use the word antiquated, but we're doing a whole lot of hard checks. We're paying for check stock. We're paying people to actually stuff thousands of envelopes per month. We're paying postage on each of those envelopes. And so we just did an analysis of what that is costing us annually. And this could turn into immediate savings. This is what I call low-hanging fruit. The first thing we can grab to pull some monies back in would be this area right here. The only thing that would take some time in implementing this would be bringing our vendors up to speed. So I don't see this being a 100% switch. There are going to be some who just still want to get a hard check, but I expect that percentage to be under 20. So I would expect 80 to 85% of our vendors to have to receive their payments electronically. So implementation of the ACH vendor payments versus paper checks. We're currently cutting 2,600 checks per month. Okay. 500 of those are AP and about 2,100 are Section 8 checks. The check stock is $275 for 1,000 checks. So that's costing us $455 per month just to cut the checks for the check stock itself. Then you got your postage for those same amount of checks is $1,430. This is per month. Cost of envelopes per month. That's the cost for 500 envelopes. That's the cost per month to mail out these checks. Then we looked at the labor that it took to scan the 2,100 checks the 500 checks, all the backup has to be physically scanned, as well as the check having to be stuffed and then mailed out. And so that cost of labor, we figured at 30 hours a month, averaging $20 per hour. That's another $600 a month. For total labor cost, just for cutting hard checks of $3,310 a month, And if you annualize that, you're looking at about $40,000 a year. That doesn't seem like a lot of money on $100 million budget, but money is money. That money can be reallocated and repositioned somewhere else. And that's exactly what we plan to do. So outside of that, other potential cost saving areas, and these are not going to be on a slide here. We can generate other operational efficiencies. We need to go to, as Mr. Northern and I have discussed, going to what we call just-in-time delivery of appliances, okay, and fixed assets. This will alleviate the over warehousing of fixed assets. That creates a potential loss of fixed assets. So you don't want to have more inventory than you need. And currently we're working to change that, and that will heavily bring down some of our costs. We want to implement inventory labeling. After some conversations, we heard a lot of appliances and inventory out there that have not been actually labeled. Okay, that's going to cut down on the potential loss, which will be cut down on our cost to replace those that we thought we had on hand. So that's another area. So there are other opportunities, but in an operation of this size, just those two alone would bring back lots of savings that Mr. Northern and the team could sit down and see how to reposition more efficiently to help with operations. Okay. There's several others, and I won't belabor you with all the other areas. We will have more detail on after I've had more than 4 weeks to assess where the other opportunities are. Excuse me. I want to give you a quick audit update. And so Department of Housing and Urban Development has extended the submission due date of our unaudited financial data for fiscal year 2021. So we've got a 60-day extension. So it must be received, and it's been extended to October 30th, 2021. And so that, and the auditors are diligently working along with consultants to make sure that we meet that deadline. And from my quick analysis, everything seems to be on par. There's very few items left on the prepared by client list to be submitted. And we look really good at meeting that deadline. That finishes my report. I'll take any questions at this time.
Any questions, commissioners?
Thank you for the report.
Thank you very much. I look forward to more of these.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jones.
Mhm.
Assisted housing in section 8.
I'll be handling that report for us.
Thank you.
Is this the approval? Okay.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to present this action item at today's board meeting. Doing so will permit continuous workflow within the Section 8 department. The purpose of this request is to obtain board approval to revise the Section 8 administrative plan to be in compliance with HUD regulations and overall agency goals by updating verbiage to coincide with policy changes. These revisions relate to the following subject matters and in this order: removal of the current waiting list preferences, addition of 3 new waiting list preferences, update of the special transfer process, and the addition of the emergency housing vouchers policy. I will go over each page which denotes a change, amendment, or deletion. As a reference, please note, all text with strike through signifies deletion, and all text with red denotes additions. As we go over, please let me know if there are any questions. So the first 2 pages are removing preference related verbiage from the table of contents and from the administrative plan. The third page, crosses out Board of Commissioners from the special transfer programs and adds President, CEO, or designee. And the remainder of the page and page 4 removes the verbiage of the waiting list preferences.
Ms. Drake,
Yes,
could you
sir.
kind of, I know that just so that the board members along with the community that's listening in can understand our justification and reasoning
For
to
taking-
remove some of the preferences.
Sure, definitely. So the reason that we decided that to move the preferences is that we feel that we can assist the same targeted population faster when we remove those preferences, and also to ensure that we're being good stewards of our subsidies by maximizing the number of families that can be assisted. So for example, these past few months, we've realized that only about 5% of our families actually qualified for the preferences that they claim. So as such, families were stating that they qualified for certain of our waiting list preferences, and in essence, they did not actually qualify. So when you qualify or you say you have a preference, it moves you up on the waiting list where you are. Once you get to the waiting list, once you get to the top, if you can't provide the verification for that preference, we have to remove that preference and put you back rightfully where you would have been if you hadn't basically applied with that preference. So the same amount of families still get help. The same population still gets assisted, but what it does is it kind of prolongs the housing process because we pull you up to the top in good faith effort that you qualify for the preference. When we get to you, you don't qualify for the preference. We have to put you back and then pull those other families. So they still get to stay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So we're saying we're eliminating the homeless applicant, we're eliminating the homeless preference, and we're eliminating the displaced
Yes, sir.
preference,
Yes, sir.
and we're eliminating working families
Yes, sir.
preference.
Yes, sir.
Well, and other reasons that we decided, this is something that we talked about early on when I first got here. A lot of housing authorities got away from the preferences. It's a cost savings to the organization because we go through this process trying to have people approve preferences when they've been on a waiting list for 3 years. And then also HUD recommended that we do this because I think we mentioned to the board that we're in a situation where we need to kind of lease up close to 700 vouchers before the end of the year. And part of the problem was that we pulling people off the waiting list. They can't prove the preference. We got to put them back, then go through the list again. So it was just taking too much time and energy when we can just utilize a couple preferences around the demo and the crime victims and things like that, and just still help the same amount of people. Right now, we could possibly be helping another 800 families
That's correct.
if we leased up everybody right now.
Yes, sir.
And the problem has been trying to prove preferences that people don't have. And when we ask people, well, why did you say you had it? Well, we thought it was going to help us faster. So it was just something that's really not helping. And a lot of times those with the homeless provider, like for example, we always have special set asides for those populations. For example, we got the 91 vouchers set aside for emergency during the pandemic. And so we work with our homeless providers. So they send them right to us. Right? We get it right from them. And so we're able to lease those individuals up. So it's just more efficiencies around that. And then, you pulling people off the waiting list and they have hopes to get housed, and you can say, I'm sorry, you got to go back on the list now. All right. So this has been really challenging for our team members to go through that with our clients. And at the end of the day, it's causing us to lose a lot in terms of ability to lease people up faster.
You have
You
questions?
good, Commissioner Davis?
I don't know if I'm good or not, but I just, I thank you for your explanation. And if this is if we have these preferences and that is delaying our process, then that's understandable. But I'm still concerned that, for someone that does have a legitimate preference, that now they will not be given a preference. And so that's my concern. I'm gonna go ahead and let you complete your report, and then I may address some items later, but I do have some reservation
Yes, sir. And may I add, Mr. Northern has said that we will continue to analyze and review the need for preferences. So in the event that they are needed, we can always add them back. But for this current waiting list, we've selected all families off of the waiting list at this time. So no one has experienced a delay.
Gotcha.
If that helps. The fifth page, as I have on the screen, it adds three new waiting list preferences that are most prevalent to the agency at this time. Those will include the public housing demo dispo, public housing crime victims, and public housing uninhabitable. The 6th through the 10th pages are the removal waiting list preference verbiage.
Ms. Dre, how long do we allow a client to try to prove a preference? I don't,
To prove their preference.
so yeah, how, if.
So once they're selected from the waiting list, they should have that information available for their appointment. If they don't have the information, then we send them a missing information letter. Generally, most of the time, especially most recently, we've actually had clients write us letters saying that they don't qualify for the preference.
Okay, so we send them a letter saying, okay, come in, bring all your information.
Which is at least 2 weeks. Yes, sir.
2 weeks. So we give them 2 weeks to pull the information together. They'll get there at sometimes, and sometimes they'll send a letter say we don't have the information.
That's correct.
And so if they get there and they don't have the preference information completed, do we give them any additional time?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay, all right.
And also, if someone said that they needed more time, that they did qualify, we also afford them that opportunity as well. The 11th through the 16th pages adds our new program, which is the emergency housing vouchers. On March the 11th, 2021, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 into law, which provides over $1.9 trillion in relief to address the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy, public health, state and local government, individuals, and businesses. Section 3202 of the ARP appropriates $5 billion for new incremental housing vouchers. The renewal of the emergency housing vouchers and fees for the cost of administering the emergency housing vouchers and other eligible expenses defined by the notice to prevent, prepare, and respond to coronavirus to facilitate the leasing of the emergency housing vouchers. HABD was allocated an initial number of 91 emergency housing vouchers. Policy for administration of the allocated must be reviewed, approved, and implemented in order to move forward with processing. The additions represented in this policy is guidance as outlined in the PIH notice 2021-15 and 2021-20 respectively. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Again, this is the what I mentioned where we're working directly with our continuum of care and homeless providers that are, it's based on a referral basis where they send them directly to us to get them housed in this area.
So thank you for the report. It
Yes,
was good and in depth. I too had a similar concern as Commissioner Davis when I saw some of the reorganizing. And a couple of, I guess I understand where some of this is coming from, and you guys did a good job explaining that. I guess first was the impetus to make these changes because of the new laws passed, and then also kind of a review of our own, processes that were getting backlogged with the 5% and everything, or was there a comparison to say more national plans or other agencies or HUD directives that say this is kind of a more, I guess, ideal approach to the waiting list? I guess I'm trying to figure out kind of.
A combination of all of it, to be honest. Like Mr. Northern said, we looked at a lot of other agencies who are removing some of their preferences. We also looked internally here, how many of our families claim the preferences versus how many actually qualify for the preferences that they claim. And also we looked at our leasing potential and how fast we can lease families that need housing if we were to remove them.
And we had a meeting with HUD too. And so HUD had a policy strength team out of DC working with us to give us recommendations on what we can do to resolve our issue. Again, like I said before, we had close to 800 people, 800 families in terms of leasing potential. And a lot of that backlog was because people couldn't prove their preferences. So they just had to go on a list.
And so kind of as a follow-up to that, have you run the numbers on, it looks like we've almost kind of shifted some of the priorities from the wait list or the preference list to Exhibit L that has the emergency housing vouchers for just about every category except for the working families. Do we know if there's kind of is the offset going to match up, or you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. With the emergency housing vouchers, families are able to get certified through the agencies that we work with, which is One Roof. One Roof is our continuum of care in our area, and the YWCA. The YWCA is our victim service provider. So in the event that a family is homeless or is a victim of domestic violence, they can get certified through those agencies and they will get directly referred here. At this time, we don't have a standing waiting list for the emergency housing vouchers. We have vouchers available. So pending their certification gets passed over here, then they're able to quickly get processed at this time.
Do you anticipate an efficiency with that? I mean, I guess it sounds like there's just kind of it's slowing things down to have this wait list. And so our potential residents are missing out. And so that's kind of the impetus for this whole thing. But do we anticipate, if you go the Exhibit L route, that there's going to be, using the continuum of care that we have in place, do we anticipate this can be a faster process for those
Yes.
individuals to get housing?
I do.
And then as far as the working family portion goes, is there any sort of replacement, and how many people have qualified for the working family preference over the past year that this will affect?
The working family preference specifically was put in place for our project-based voucher sites. Those are the sites that were developed from our redevelopment of our sites. Those will be in place based on the tax credits that those developers qualified for in order to get those. So a site, for example, if they apply for a certain tax credit and it says a certain amount of families must work to get there, then once we incorporate that site's into our administrative plan, it will list those specifics for that waiting list, which would include the preferences per site.
Okay, so we're not per se eliminating a category of working family
No.
accessibility.
Not as a whole, no, sir.
No.
Not as a whole.
We run so many programs, and as we look at repositioning more, and we had this conversation about how we can kind of message out and explain eligibility to our various programs and which programs we have. And our communications team working with our marketing company now to pull that together so that we can get it out there. We kind of going to use the same concept that we did with the Office of Constituent Concerns and do a little video with the links so people can understand, like if it's the voucher program, if it's the emergency voucher, if it's public housing, if it's what it was. Titusville, I always pronounce
Villas
it.
at Titusville.
Yeah, Village of
Yes, sir.
Titusville. So depending on because a lot of the eligibility is different from all that.
Sure.
So we're working on all that kind of stuff now.
Well, I
Um,
kind of wrap up my comments with, I know you
I
guys,
have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So the people that was already on the emergency list, how will they know that the emergency list has changed? The preference has changed. How would they know?
So the emergency housing voucher program, that's a new program that's just been implemented, that's effective 7/1. However, what we did do is we sent a public notice to everyone that's on our current waiting list to let them know about the emergency housing voucher program. Also, we have already contacted and we're working with all families off our waiting list. So there's not one family at this time that we're not currently assisting.
Okay, so what about the homeless?
We're working with everyone that's on our waiting list now, regardless of what their preference was. So this change will be in the future. It won't be on those families that we're working with now.
Okay, thank you.
Won't affect them.
think I was just gonna wrap up my comments too, by saying, I see you guys putting a lot of work in this. I see where it's coming from, and obviously I trust you guys to make good decisions on this, and it seems like you're doing that. Like Vice Chairman Lewis highlight, I think messaging is important, and I
Yes,
think
sir.
just a little follow-up on behalf of the board, if we all approve this. I would like to at least make sure the comments coming back from potential clients, we're monitoring that to make sure there isn't some ill effect from it that we didn't realize. So to your point, Ms. Drake, that we can maybe make a change again if we need to.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna say, I see that one of our newest leaders, Seth Embry, has something he wanted to add. Mr. Embry, if you just introduce yourself for those that don't know you, and then continue.
Sure. As of I think June the 28th or July something. I'm not sure the date, but I'm the new Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, which means in a nutshell that I oversee the housing operations and Section 8 departments. So I've been, in these few weeks working very closely with both Ms. Drake and Mr. Blankenship on those programs. And I just wanted to highlight one thing that Ms. Drake said, which is that all the families that are currently on the HCV wait list are being contacted for eligibility. And so because of the number of families that we need to bring into the program, we won't have a waiting list per se after that. And so the removal of the preferences is really an administrative task to cut down the amount of time that it takes for us to pull somebody from the wait list and issue a voucher. But anyone who's currently on our wait list who's eligible will likely be issued a voucher. And so, and that's in the short term. So we're thinking in the next several months. But I want to also emphasize one thing that was discussed, which is the number of vouchers that we have the least, which could be 700, could be 800. It depends on the families and the cost of the housing assistance. And so it's a number that we'll see as we go forward. But one thing that we haven't said is that each of those vouchers is also connected to a dollar amount. And so we're talking about hundreds of families, but we also have a lot of unspent money to assist families. And so what the potential ill effect for the housing authority is that at the end of the year or at the start of next year, if there's not enough money nationally to renew all vouchers across the country, so not just in Birmingham, but across the country, and that depends on the federal appropriations process. If there's not enough money, what HUD will do is go around to all the PHAs and take what they call excess reserves. And so right now we have a lot of excess reserves. So we could stand to lose, Birmingham could stand to lose a few $1 million if we don't get not only the families that are on our wait list leased up, but we might have to have more families come in, depending on how many families are eligible. And so it's really a top priority of many top priorities to lease hundreds of families, hundreds of Birmingham families before the end of the year, so that our agency and our community doesn't lose millions of dollars that have accumulated in the last several years. And so the importance really of our efforts in leasing can be overstated, both from a financial perspective, but also for the hundreds of families in Birmingham that stand to get a voucher and have affordable housing, for long into the future that they can use as a springboard for their financial empowerment and for, increases in education and health, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're certainly concerned about potential ill effects down the road, but really through the end of this calendar year, we need families. And so there really won't be families that need to be assisted, particularly on our wait list, that will not be assisted if they're eligible. And then certainly going into 2022, we should look at what the priorities are for you as commissioners in our community. Where's the greatest need for housing, and how do we formulate our preferences long-term for that, or adjust them? And that's something we're certainly open to, but I just wanted to highlight the importance of us moving ahead with as few administrative delays as possible in this process.
Once that money's gone, it's gone. And so that's resources that we won't have here in Birmingham to help families. And part of the problem is that it's taking too long to lease up families because of the preference process. So every family on our waiting list is getting an opportunity to get housed right now. does not affect on nobody else currently on our wait list at all.
Mr. Chairman, so, and I'm glad that you guys explained it. I feel a little bit better now that you explained it. I still have some reservations, but I do feel better. And because we don't want to have a delay in our families being able to take advantage of these vouchers. My only concern is that, was there any other options that you guys looked into other than just totally eliminating the preferences in order to make your process more efficient, in order to be able to lease to more families? Was this the only option that you came up with? Or that, okay, we're just going to eliminate all the preferences for a certain amount of time so we can, lease to X amount of families?
Well, we came up with, it was a number of options that we had to utilize in order to make this work. And Mr. Emery, I'll let you kind of go,
Yeah.
because you kind of helped lead that effort.
Well, I'll say that the number one thing that we're doing is that currently, as constitute, our Section 8 department doesn't have the capacity to lease hundreds of vouchers through the end of the year. So we're engaging a consultant to do the heavy lifting for us. So for instance, those 2,500 names that are currently on our wait list, they're all going to be processed. But we just needed more people, more hands, more bodies. And so that's going to speed up things as well. And so administratively, those are the things. We also have a number of other things that we could do, such as, I'll give one example, just to illustrate kind of the pros and cons. We have the ability to allow landlords and tenants at initial, when they're first kind of getting together, to certify that the house meets the inspection standards. The challenge, and that would eliminate the need to actually send an inspector out upfront, and that will cut down on some of the time. The challenge there is that Birmingham, because the older housing stock, has an unusually high number of properties that just will not meet our quality standards. And so at the end of the day, there would be a good percentage of families that would have to move within probably 3 to 6 months from the place that they just moved to, which is an expense for them and administrative expense for us, which we can absorb, but it just wouldn't be beneficial to the family. So there are everything else in terms of our processes to go from eligibility screening to lease signing. Those things, we're doing a lot of that online through the contractor that we're engaging. And so it reduces the paper kind of going into either the office to be reviewed or through the mail, which can be delayed at times. And so I'm confident that our process has enough automation that the inefficiencies have been kind of taken out. But the one piece is really the inspection piece that I wouldn't be comfortable moving away from, because I think it'll result in some real serious and unfortunate consequences, including people living in unsanitary and unsafe conditions. So other than that, I think that engaging the contractor is really going to help us get as close to the goal as possible. And I think all the other inefficiencies that you might see in a voucher program are going to be weeded out through the engagement of that contractor. And then going forward, we need to reconstitute our business practices to adopt those efficiencies long-term, including, there's, just to take 30 more seconds, a lot of problems still existing with the technology transformation that we did, a year ago. And that's limiting how much we can do through automation and through our online processes, in addition to the stuff Mr. Jones talked about on the finance end. So there's a number of things that I think long-term we can address, but in the short term, I feel good about where we are.
Very good. So I'm going to wrap this up, Mr. Chairman, but I get the sense that, and I know we have a consultant looking at the different departments or whatever to see, assess things. And I know that, we're doing this for the reason of making sure that we're providing the most amount of vouchers to the most amount of our residents or our potential residents. So I get it. I think there's maybe a larger issue, and I think maybe that'll probably come out. I think maybe from what I'm getting the sense that there may be a staffing issue, or maybe we may need to be looking at being right sized in that department. the sense that I'm getting from just kind of looking at all this. I think we may have a right sizing issue with our staff. Because, if we're talking about eliminating these preferences and, maybe all we need to do is contact people for eligibility, then, I don't know if we really need to go this far. But I do understand why we're doing it at this point in time. And so I'm willing to accept this at this point in time, and maybe down the road we'll reassess it. But I think there's maybe a larger issue, maybe a staffing issue or something that may be causing this to be the impetus of what's going on. That's the sense that I'm getting.
I'd love to, take what Mr. Embry said and, kind of beginning of the year, or maybe before then, or, let's get back to this. Obviously, let's move forward and do what we need to do to close out the year in the right fashion. But I'd love to come back to this and figure out how it plays into the overall picture of what we're trying to do.
And again, just to reiterate that's what we're doing as an organization now. I'm excited to have Mr. Jones and Mr. Embry here, along with, our current team members. We just need to reevaluate who we are as an organization. What is our goals? What are these mission points? And as Mr. Embry said, that we have not totally implemented a lot of like software. We went through a software conversion, and it like a lot of the modules that make work easier for us and make flow better, we didn't even institute or not using it. And so we're trying to assess all that. The bad thing is that, you come in with a new leader, new leadership team. We have so many needs, but we still have to work today, right? So some of the changes so that we can work today. As he said before, if we don't change, that means we still have to deal with the antiquated type systems and policies, which wouldn't give us a chance to evaluate and say, okay, now we're in a place that we're moving forward effectively. We have our right team, our right leaders. We have the right systems in place, technology, the right policies, and let's see what our community needs. And that's what usually happens. The community come together and provide the needs. So that's how preferences are usually developed. And instead of, some people just put every preference that's eligible from HUD in a policy, and it really hurts and harms the housing authorities versus looking at the really actual need of that community. We also talked about increasing our payment standards. There's a lot of things that we can do because we can attract better landlords, better properties, or more landlords or new landlords. So there's a whole lot of things that we're looking at. And so going back to your point, Commissioner Davis, that we looked at the roof of everything that we can do to make sure that we don't lose the money or lose the opportunity to house current citizens in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And this is the best solution for us now.
Right. Well, I'm going to support this measure. Bottom line, if I was homeless, and I didn't go to the One Roof or the YWCA, and I came to the Housing Authority for some assistance, I would want some, right? And so I just want to, be comfortable that, if I was homeless, if I was in their shoes, I would want assistance, and I wouldn't want to be at the bottom of the totem pole. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from, but I'm going to support this.
So just for that one, and not to belabor it, but if a client came and said, I'm homeless, you don't have a preference for me, right now we'll say, go here, get certified, and come right back to us, and we'll give you a voucher right now. So that's what I'm saying. It's not hurting no one in that case, right? They may. And now a client can make a choice that I ain't going to YMCA, I don't want to go to One Roof, but that's the option they have to do, right? So
basically we would have staff, caseworkers to direct them. Okay, very good.
Streamline
This is a
process. We have a
process, it sounds
streamlined
like.
process.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So it's not us like getting out of the
Not
business.
taking a week for this. to
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
Just a call or email. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm sending somebody over here, X, Y, Z.
Okay. Yeah, I just think this is something that I'm in support of it, but let's just keep our finger on the pulse of this. And I'd love to hear, going forward in the next couple board meetings, how this is working out. And we reserve the right to change it back if we need to, right?
Right. I mean, and that's why we come with policies now, because it's current needs that we have that we're not able to operate effectively. So we're having policy changes now to make it work for us to help the clients in the community.
If there's no other discussion, I will entertain a motion on this item.
Motion to approve the revision to the Section 8 administrative plan as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we execute the required documents for approval of the implementation of revisions to the Section 8 administrative plan. All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that item carries.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. All right, Mr. Northern Real Estate Development.
Yes, before we go into that, I think our consultant's on the line, Ms. Herrera. But
Yes,
before we
good
want,
afternoon.
good afternoon. Before we go to that, I just want to just reiterate how excited I am to have, all our members here, but Seth, and we talked a lot about policy. He not only worked in operations, but he helped write policy direction for HUD and Congress to help all the housing authorities. And so I'm confident when we work with HUD and set the table with our team members and community partners and figure out what's the best solution right now that with it, if it wasn't right, he would have said something in terms of how we can move forward. So I'm really excited about that and the confidence. And as we continually build, and I think he's not only been able in this short time frame along with Mr. Jones and Ms. Foster, but not just provide assistance and help, but educate some of our team members that's here on some of the new ways of doing some things. So
Great. It's always good to have friends from DC.
let's move in here. All right, Ms. Herrera, sorry.
Yes, that's fine. Go ahead. Can you bring up the report? I don't know who's driving.
Just a second.
This one, right?
There we go. Thank you. Our biggest focus at this point in time has been on the Southtown redevelopment. The last few weeks, we've been very focused on trying to get ready to get the demolition kicked off. Blocks B, C, and D are fully vacant. So we've moved forward with some of the pre-demolition activities. And that includes, we're working to get the contractor to do the installation of the perimeter fencing, providing us with the site utilization plan and the sequencing of how he's going to do the demolition, working on pulling his permits in coordination with all the utility providers for the shutoffs and the removal of meters. The demolition itself cannot actually commence until we get the final sign off on what's called the Part 58 environmental. This is the federal environmental clearance that the city of Birmingham is completing, but has been held up because of the designation by the State Historic Preservation Officer that the site is basically has historic significance. We've entered into an MOU. They've approved that. And basically everybody has signed off. The MOU is a 3-part MOU between the city of Birmingham, the Housing Authority, and the State Historic Preservation Office. Requires us to basically photograph and provide a narrative history of the site. And so that's what we will do under that MOU. The city has now published the notification. So we anticipate at this point that we should have final approval on the environmental and have all of the clearance. Right now, the estimated date is August the 23rd. Upon receipt of that final sign off from HUD, we will then be able to proceed with the notice to proceed to actually begin the demolition itself. In addition to that, one of the issues that has arisen is some concerns about some of the soils at the site. The developer has provided us with a report indicating that there are some unsuitable soils. We have been working with our engineering firm to take a look at their report, and basically we'll be getting back to them on whether or not we concur or not with what their recommendation is. Obviously, their request to deal with the unsuitable soils will result in significant more cost, we believe, to the housing authority. So we're taking a good hard look at that to see what's really required. The master development agreement with the developer is very vague and does not have a clear definition of unsuitable soils. So we're having legal counsel review that with us as well. As far as the 2 phases on Block D, which are the 2 phases that are in line to begin construction, the first component is the family component. That's the 60-unit tax credit property of family housing. One of the things that we're experiencing is just what's going on in the marketplace right now, and that is the increasingly escalating cost of construction materials and labor. And so at this point, the family site Breck development is the lead on that particular phase. And so we're working on some value engineering and looking at ways in which we can kind of address some of these escalating costs. So hopefully we can try to get a handle on that. The second component of the affordable is the senior housing. And the Benoit Group is the lead on that component. They are just now finalizing financing applications to submit to Alabama Housing Finance for both the tax exempt bonds and the 4% credits. The Housing Authority had provided a preliminary commitment of $5.5 million of soft funds. Because this project does not have any public housing in it, those soft funds would have to come from non-federal resources. But HUD has just recently, in the last about 90 days, issued a new development tool called Faircloth to RAD. It's got a funny name to it, but it's basically a provision that would allow us to be able to do a mixed financing project and be able to utilize federal funds for that soft financing. So currently I'm working with the Benoit Group on what the pro forma would look like if we were able to utilize the FTR development tool so that we could be able to utilize some of our federal funding sources versus having to use our very limited non-federal resources. So we'll be continuing to look at that over the next few weeks to see if that's a viable option. There are two additional parcels that the Housing Authority is acquiring as part of Southtown's redevelopment. It's a small parcel that's owned by AT&T, and then the 2 shotgun houses. We did have to extend the purchase option for those through August the 31st because they also cannot be fully acquired and closed on until such time that we receive the environmental clearance. So that's pretty much the update on Southtown at the moment. In addition to that, the other things that we've been working on the development side is our public housing portfolio repositioning for all of our public housing properties, with particular emphasis on our legacy properties, which are our older, larger properties. We issued a developer solicitation, and we're very pleased that we received incredible response from 14 different development teams. Some of the best affordable housing developers throughout the Southeast responded. So we're in the process, the evaluation committee has been appointed by the CEO, and we're in the process of reviewing all of those responses. We will be going through that process. We have a meeting next week with the evaluation committee, and then we'll be inviting a short list of firms to come forward. We do intend, under the solicitation, we do intend to select multiple developers that would be working on the different projects simultaneously. And then finally, some of our other transactions, I just highlighted 2 in particular. Woodlawn, which has been on the drawing board for quite some time. We got clearance from HUD to move forward with that project. So the subsidy layering review package was completed and submitted to the HUD office last week. That normally takes anywhere from 30 to 60 days to get approved. Once we get that approval back, we'll be able to execute the agreement for the project-based vouchers for the Woodlawn Foundation so that they can move forward with their construction. And then Tuxedo Terrace, there's a series of things that we have been working on with Tuxedo Terrace, but the critical one that we've put a big emphasis on is being able to clear a title issue that relates to an easement from the county for sewer that is currently under a building. The equity investor from 10 years ago has not provided the last equity installment payment. The Housing Authority has about $8 million tied up in Tuxedo Terrace, that if we can get this cleared, those are funds that will be paid to the Housing Authority and be able to allow us to bring in some non-federal cash to assist us with a lot of our other development efforts. Any questions? I went through that kind of fast.
We did just receive a partial payment on Titusville, about what, 400 and some thousand, I think it was.
It was right around 500,000. It was a portion of our developer fee that was due to us from phase 1. And we committed to turn around and put that back as a soft loan into phase 2, but it allows us to move forward with phase 2, yes.
I just had a couple follow-ups. I appreciate the report, and I think I have continued to enjoy these because I think they're really a good way to kind of get a snapshot of our activities, not just for us as a board, but for the community at large and for everybody that's watching or paying attention. To that end, as to Southtown, the unsuitable soils issue, I'm a little concerned. Why is this just now coming up, considering we haven't begun demolition?
The development partner, their engineering firm, through looking at the redevelopment efforts, has looked at all of those sites. The letter we received from them was from January of this year, basically notifying us that their engineering firm had identified unsuitable soils.
I'm just concerned when they, came up with their bid and everything that they didn't do that, have that consideration originally. And I understand things change with construction costs and all that, but this seems like more preliminary consideration that wasn't made.
Yeah, this is actually the developer. The demolition contractor did not have any responsibility, and that's why we've thrown this back to our engineering and architect firm that prepared the demolition specs. We've gone back to them and said, we need a better analysis of what the issues are here. And so we're really kind of waiting for a written report back from them so that we can reconcile with the report that we have from the developer. So it really wasn't on the demolition contractor. It was really the architect and engineering firms that prepared the specifications for the demolition and what the requirements were for them to look at the soils at that point in time. And I think that they basically looked at the soils to be able to complete demolition and leave the site as a clear site in accordance with state and local requirements. The developer has come back and is alleging that we need to leave the site buildable for what they intend to build. And that's where the discrepancy has come in.
And I would presume it's not a demolition issue. That's the architect, though, that's part of the development group, correct?
There's both. The Housing Authority has an architect and engineering firm that prepared the demolition specs. And then the development team also has their own architects and engineers for their rebuilding.
Okay. And they just now figured this out in January that they needed more help.
We just got the letter in January. So that's the first, I didn't come on board until later, but the letter's dated January that was submitted to the Housing Authority. Yes.
Cindy, can you just mention our negotiations briefly that we're having with the development team around our master development agreement? She did mention that it was very vague, and in the future, we're going to really solidify and make it better so that all the I's and are dotted and T's are crossed. Right now, it's just really vague, and so it's a lot of back and forth. So you can go ahead, Cindy, and kind of.
Yeah, when Mr. Northern and I came on board, and I came on board, we looked at the master development agreement, and one of the things the developer had come back was asking for some amendments to the master development agreement. And basically I'm of the thought, and David and I both discussed that, we don't amend master development agreements. What happens with master development agreements is as you move forward with the closing phase, the closing documents supersede the master development agreement. And so we basically told the developer we were not going to amend the master development agreement, and that as we move forward with each phase, we would do the development services agreement, which will be required by the investor and the lender. But the master development agreement does, have some issues. And this is a very good example of where there is no specific definition of unsuitable soils. It simply gives a definition of demolition to include the removal of unsuitable soils. But the agreement itself has no definition of what are unsuitable soils. And so that's kind of where we're in discussion right now, is because their definition of unsuitable soils may not match with what ours will be. And that's kind of where the discrepancy is. And the master development agreement, again, it's one that we inherited, and it's one that we would look and approach differently going forward with new developers.
And thank you. I think that kind of was leading to my second issue, is the issue of the kind of construction costs rising, which, obviously everybody understands has been a lot recently, but more so, what are we doing in our contracts moving forward, particularly as we look at a lot of new ones coming up? I think we need to try and do our best to get a handle on, future proofing some of these when it may, we obviously understand that some of these things take time. And so when there's a bid received and it's inevitable that construction costs might rise, that somehow then they come back to us right before we start work and say, well, wait a minute, now we got to pay more. Well, that kind of should have been
Sure.
anticipated from day one. And I would presume some of the contract language helped us there, but to the extent it doesn't, we need to continue to evaluate that.
That's one thing for certain is that, we're looking at every piece of everything that we do. And we're, making sure that we focus on the best interest of the housing authority and clients that we serve first, right? And so, and just from my experience, some of the contracts we have currently may not, it may be too wide open where it's like, well, whoever, and a lot of times they come back on the housing authority up to cost for everything. And that's not
I
fair,
wanna-
especially when we have partnerships.
In the case of Southtown, the only financial commitment that the Housing Authority made is the $5.5 million for the senior phase. There is no other, so even though the family component has had increased in cost, there's no obligation of the Housing Authority to cover those costs. We're in a partnership with these developers. And so together as partners, we have to go out and secure other sources. And so, we've brainstormed about other sources that are out there to secure. One of the discussions that we're in, and we're trying to set up a meeting with Alabama Housing Finance, very interesting, Southtown is no longer located in what's called a qualified census tract for the tax credit program. When you're in a qualified census tract or a QCT, then you get what's a 30% boost. So you're able to generate 30% additional equity. And so most tax credit properties are in QCTs. Southtown was a QCT in 2020. I'm sorry, in 2019. And in 2020, because of census data, it no longer qualified as a QCT. And so that basically reduced the equity in these projects by 30%, which makes the family project more difficult because it's a 9% credit. And most 9% tax credit, in fact, 99% of every 9% tax credit project I've ever done does not need secondary soft financing because the 9% credits generate sufficient equity that the projects financially can work. The 4% deals, generate half the amount of equity, and so they always have a gap in financing. And so the senior component is a 4% tax credit transaction, and that's why I think the Housing Authority initially committed the soft funding to the senior component, and we have no commitment to the family component right now. So we're just as a partner working with the team to try to come up with additional financing to help fill that construction gap.
Well, thank you. And the only last thing I would say is just, as we have our procurement files and things, if our partners continue to ding us for more money every time something comes up, I think it needs to be noted in these files because I don't think it's a good partnership when sometimes people try and take advantage. So I understand there are certain realities that everybody faces, and I'm not saying that's exactly what's occurring here. Obviously, in isolation, we don't have all the details, but I just, I would like us to keep an eye on that.
Absolutely.
We've recently made some, a number of changes on how we evaluate and look at decisions, whether it's contractors. And we've decided at times recently to go with the second bidder. A lot of times we end up going with the lowest bidder and then we come back and get dinged with, like you said before, with a lot of extra costs when if we went through the second bidder, who was a little more already, they already had it taken care of.
Right,
And
because
so-
that lowest bidder that we pick now is our highest bidder because they hit us on the back end.
Yeah,
I would,
they come in low and then hit us on the back end and go up to be the highest.
I'm in favor of rewarding and shaming people. And when that happens and we feel like it's, it's almost like extortion,
Yeah.
we need to share that information with every other municipal agency in the city and everybody else so that people know like this is what happened to us. So that I think that can provide some kind of cover for, this kind of bad, I'm not gonna call it bad behavior, but it's unfortunate behavior that we see.
And holding people responsible. And we've had these conversations and holding them accountable, whether it's our architects, our engineers, whether it's our staff, whether it's, a couple guys, I said, give me your performance bonds then. If you want more money, give me a performance bond so we can see if we just go to the insurance company, find someone else to do the job. If you can't do it. So we have to act like a business and be a business and not just be a open bank in some cases.
Well, all this is very helpful to look at. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions for any other commissioner?
Great. Thank you for that report.
Thank you.
So Northern, I know we got some other documents in our packet, but it's not necessarily reflected in our agenda. Like public safety.
Oh, if you wanna do it.
It's just FYI. Okay. All right. That being the case, the next item on our agenda is presentation by persons desiring to speak for HABD Board of Commissioners. Now, I will say this, just as FYI, please wait to be recognized. And then once I recognize you, then feel free to speak. I know earlier, somebody by the name of BJ had their hand up, so we'll start with BJ. If you're still there, BJ.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. If you don't mind, introduce yourself and then go with your comment.
All right, thank you. My name is Janice Bishop. And I'd like to first start off by saying, welcome, Mr. Northern.
Thank you.
This is not my first meeting, but this is my first time meeting here. I live at currently Tuxedo Terrace Apartments in Ensley. And I did hear you on Miss Benny Miles' radio show a couple of weeks back.
Okay. I haven't heard this.
So I like to first start by saying, I heard you say earlier that the Housing Authority is easy to get in contact with. It could be me, but I left several messages, and I may want to verify the number that I left it at. It was the 3rd Avenue location, 205-521-0774. Does that sound like the right number?
It's 773.
Okay. So I left a message back in May, around Memorial Day, and no one, I think that message stated that someone will return my call within 48 hours, but no one ever did. So I did speak with someone shortly before the meeting began today, so that's clear. And I made the change or amendment to my number. Second thing, I want to go back to the budget. I would like to make a suggestion, and I apologize, it's my son in the background. I like to make a suggestion when it comes down to the contractors that we use. First, I would like for them to be professional. We went through several different contractors as far as our lawn is concerned, and I think we may be on the right road, but I would like to suggest you all adding the cutting of the pruning of the trees, because these trees have not been cut in about 2 years. And I have been asking the manager, when are they going to get cut? So I'm not sure if that's included in the budget, that and the scrubs or bushes, but it's starting to look back like before it was renovated. And that's not a good thing, especially when we talk about fighting crime. I have a tree right now that's over the roof of my apartment. I have had a leak that I've been dealing with since I've been here. Housing Authority took over this location 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years in August. So that's just a suggestion. I also have some other concerns, most of which I have shared with Mr. W. Blankenship. But I would like to ask about the lease. When you recertify, when the clients recertify on their annual, why is it that Housing Authority does not give the client a lease? My son has a disability, and I have him on waiting list to get in schools, and in order for me to register him, they asked for a lease. Since I've been here and prior to Housing Authority of Birmingham Division taking over, I have always been given a lease. So do you know why we're no longer being able to provide a lease?
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. I'll give Mr. Northern an opportunity to go by the look. You had a couple comments and then a question. So, Mr. Northern.
Well, I don't know offhand, but we'll make sure we follow up and make sure you get a copy of it. I know that we had a contractor over there working at one point, and now we're doing it ourselves. So I have to look into that. I don't want to misspeak off right now, but I'll take a look at that.
And we can certainly handle, at least do a review of that property around the tree,
Yeah.
pruning and bushes needing to be trimmed. Great.
Thank you so much, Mr. Northern.
Thank you, Ms. Bishop. And just real quick, Mr. Northern, maybe you want to mention the Office of Constituents Concerns for other people who may be listening.
Yeah, actually, we want to just continually reiterate, and just last week, I think we put it back out there so individuals could know about it, but we have the Office of Constituent Concerns. And so I know it's a lot of phone numbers floating around. The organization that we moved, some offices closed. And so that's a consistent opportunity, whether it's an email or a phone number, the individual can reach out to us and ensure that your responses are noted and you followed up with. And we have a number of people that receive that voicemail or that email so that it won't, fall on deaf ears. And so if you go to our website or one of our social media accounts, our website is www.habd.org, or either one of our social media accounts, that information is on there. More advertising about the office. And we just recently ordered business cards for the office also, that when people have concerns or if we out in the community somewhere, we can just hand them out and they can share them. And we talked about also maybe getting magnets for refrigerators and things like that, just so we can get that message out a little more.
Great. And Ms. Bibbs, if you don't mind, just post that link in the chat, as well as the very best telephone number when people have issues or questions. Thank you. Ms. Davis, Ms. Bertha Davis, you are recognized. Ms. Davis, you still there? Okay. She may have dropped. Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak before the board? All right, going once. Going twice. All right, we thank you so much. This has been a great meeting. Anything else, Mr. Northern or commissioners, before we adjourn?
No, sir. Just want to say thank you to our team that put this presentation together and worked hard to provide all this information. Thank you to the board members for attending, and focusing on the needs of the communities that we're serving here. And it's our first time being back in person together.
Yeah, it's
So
been
it's a
pretty
good
cool.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all right. So that is all. Everybody stay safe and sanitized. Thank you.